It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you today our guest, Andrew Lippa. Andrew is an accomplished composer, lyricist, librettist, performer, producer. He is the composer and lyricist of the Broadway musical Big Fish and of The Addams Family, for which his music was Tony nominated. He contributed as a songwriter and arranger for the 1999 Broadway production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, as well as composed the music for Aaron Sorkin's production of the Farnsworth Convention on Broadway. He also wrote the music and co-wrote the book for the musical John and Jen. His oratorio, I Am Harvey Milk, was commissioned by and premiered at the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus and reached #2 on the iTunes classical chart, which I think is incredible. Andrew wrote the book, the music, the lyrics for the 2000 production of The Wild Party, which garnered him a Drama Desk Award for Best Music, and the production won the Outer Critics Circle Award for Best Off-Broadway Musical. He has conducted and sung all over the world, and I could honestly go on and on sharing with you Andrew's many accomplishments and awards. But I really want to share more than anything that Andrew is an incredible teacher, an inspiring presence to be around. So let's just cut to the chase and welcome Andrew Lippa.
Hello.
Hello. You know, I tried to get the applause sound effect so I could surprise you, but I was trying to do too many things.
I do that with my keyboard. Amanda, thank you for inviting me onto this chat, and hello everybody out there. I echo Amanda's beautiful sentiments about everybody staying well, and I hope you and your families are doing fine. I have a lot to say. I know you have questions for me, but I do have a lot to say. One of them is, Amanda's being incredibly modest and humble. She was in the original cast of The Wild Party at the Manhattan Theater Club way back in 2000. And thank you for your incredible artistry and joining our company then. That's how we know each other. So that's remarkable. We've been friends for 20 years. And my relationship with the Alliance goes back also to my relationship to The Wild Party. In 1997, I was lucky enough to be able to develop the Wild Party at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Connecticut. And I had gotten, that opportunity came along right after I had gotten a job where I was going to be working on a musical called The Hot Mikado that had been co-written and directed and choreographed by David Bell, who then was, I think, the Associate Artistic Director at the Alliance. And we were doing a production in Washington, D.C. that I was going to be the assistant music director for. And then I was going to music direct my own company that was going to the Alliance and went to, I think we went to Tuts in Houston. And David understood that when I got the Wild Party opportunity at the O'Neill, I was going to have to go develop my own musical. And he made it so that I could come teach the score, go away, leave it with another music director for the rehearsal period, and then for tech, I returned after the Wild Party, also with a bunch of raw recording, and I found an engineer and studio in Atlanta, and every day when I wasn't conducting the show, I was mixing the demo, the original demo, for the Wild Party so that I could then get producers, to do the show. And so I have a real fondness for the Alliance because it was, I got to music direct and play that thrilling score. It was like a 1940s big band redo of the original Mikado, and just a really entertaining show and all music. So I got to play the whole show, and that was really fun. And I got to mix the Wild Party, the first demo that we did that was kind of like working on an original cast recording because I spent probably 50 or 60 hours just mixing that voice and piano and drums demo. And so, yay, Alliance. That's all I wanted to say.
Incredible. I did not know that. So
long ago, but I had such a good visit.
Now I'm going to step away for 2 seconds and bring something to the screen.
Great. I'll wait along with our participants who are eagerly wondering, like I am, what has she got?
You said that. I realized, look what I have on my wall.
What a party! Yes, that's amazing.
Yes. Anyhow, well, that's so.
On my show.
Yeah, and I mean, we're all just 6 degrees from each other. Andrew, I know that when we go into opening up to the Zoomers, we've kind of prepped them with your prompt that you wrote to me that I thought was so beautifully expressed. But if I may, I just have like a couple of questions for you. I love that you moved to Ohio. And it is true that as a writer, you can write anywhere. But I either you told me this or I read somewhere that you were interested in being in a place where you could have direct impact on the community. And that's a word that we take really seriously, certainly at the Alliance, and I think Atlanta, the city as a whole. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I moved to Ohio primarily to be with my fiance. That's the reason I came to Columbus. I also live in Manhattan. I'm fortunate and have a small apartment in Manhattan. So I go back and forth during safer and happier times. I spend about a week a month in New York City and about a week every 2 months in Los Angeles. So I do move around quite a bit besides being in Columbus, Ohio, which is just a wonderful city. And we bought a new house that's where you find me right now, in our new house that we haven't even done much painting or renovation or any of the stuff that we want to do on the house, but it's been a blessing to be here during this difficult time. And one of the things that I have realized over time is, for me, being in New York, being Jewish and being gay and being in New York City since 1987, that's where a lot of Jewish and gay people went. And there are 3.5 million Jewish people in the New York metropolitan area. There are a lot of gay people. I don't know what the number is, but I say in a kind of half jokey kind of way, it's easier to be gay and Jewish in New York City than, say, in Kansas City. And as I've gotten more into the community here and living here in Columbus and getting to know people and interested in the political life of Ohio and Columbus in particular, I recognize that one of the things that really charges me is being feeling in a minority population. Now, being Jewish and gay is part of, in the large scheme, a part of the minority population, but in New York City, it doesn't feel like that, or at least it didn't feel like that to me. So to be in an environment here in Central Ohio where I am a minority member of the community, where there aren't nearly the percentage of Jews here as there are in New York, there aren't nearly the percentage of gay people here, although there is a comfortable environment for gay people here in Columbus. But 5-10 miles outside of Columbus, not so comfortable. And there's something about that that really charges me and really makes me want to get involved in some ways. What those ways are, I'm not sure yet, but I'm at that beginning place of exploring that.
I love that. And at your heart, your core, you are an educator. I remember you telling me this when I first met you in 1999, I believe, that when you first moved to New York, when you graduated from University of Michigan, you first moved to New York, you taught, that's right, go blue. I say that just because so many of my friends graduated from Michigan, but I am a Seminole, I think. I don't know, it was many years ago. You started working when you moved to New York as a middle school music teacher?
Yeah, that's correct.
Columbia Grammar.
Columbia Grammar and Prep School on the Upper West Side.
And then your career took off as a composer, and you are indeed one of Broadway's great contemporary composers. And you still are so committed to mentoring, I would say young adults, but adults of all ages in theater education and arts education. And how has that role as a teacher informed your work as a writer?
It just feels like it's all one and the same for me, and I could include being a performer, whatever that means, whether a conductor, pianist, or actor. My nature, my expression, my desire, the things that attract me are always related to community, always related to finding common ground, what makes us all human, what allows us to be together, and what often keeps us from being together. My desire to be a teacher I've taught as a guest probably at musical theater programs across the world. I'd say it's nearing 50. I think. I actually, if I made the list, I probably reached nearly 50 different schools. And part of it is in what a friend of mine calls enlightened self-interest. I have a library, a growing library of musicals that I want young people to be interested in, and I want them to perform. And so if I'm the one who shows up and works with them and gives them some good feedback, they may say to their teachers, hey, we should do Andrew Lippa's show. That is, like I said, a form of enlightened self-interest, because it's not the sole reason I do anything. I like the idea of teaching a great deal because I love the art form. Yeah. And yeah. I love sharing what I love about the art form from my perspective, and being able to help young people absorb it and understand it in a way that perhaps I didn't know when I was 19, 20, 21, when I was an undergrad. And it's that old thing on the questionnaire, you know, what's something you wish someone had said to you? And I do think about that sometimes when I teach, because I wonder what they don't know, and what they would like to know, and you know, without focusing on all of the challenges of trying to sustain a life in show business. That's also one of the bigger challenges, separate from being an artist, separate from wanting to make art, is the question of how do you make a life, and how do you balance those things? You know, these are all conversations all at the same time inside the teaching.
Right. Switching to your work for a sec, your work as a writer, I find the source material that you choose to adapt to be fascinating. The character-driven stories, I mean, I guess this is the case for anything that's a good musical, right? But in particular, the shows that you work on. And these characters where the wants are so clear, the stories are set inside these very interesting time periods and settings, and sometimes there's a little surreal thrown in there. I'm thinking of Big Fish, The Man in the Ceiling, I mean, The Wild Party to a certain extent. What makes you say yes to a project? And I'm also curious what might make you pass.
Well, it's easy to say what will make me pass. All the shows I haven't done. But what would make me pass on a project? A mean-spiritedness, something that where it was merely, yeah, I suppose I could say merely an entertainment. I'm not interested in creating an entertainment. The Addams Family is the closest thing that one might look at as one of my musicals and say, it's an entertainment, it's fun, it's a fun night out of the theater. There's nothing wrong with a fun night out of the theater, and I love being part of those things, and I like taking those challenges on, because it's not easy to do either. However, I do think the Addams Family is about something a little deeper. I think it is about the notion of accepting the other. I think that it is about the notion of accepting the shadow portion of yourself. The end of the Addams Family, the character who is least articulate comes forward, lurch, and sings, move toward the darkness. It is this Joseph Campbellian, if you will, idea of that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. If anything, during this particular time in our period, the notion of the only way out is through, all of these, I think that's Churchill, all of these ideas, these ancient spiritual ideas. And in fact, last night, I'm going to veer from this question for a moment because this came to last night. I have a degree in ministry, and from an interfaith seminary in New York City called One Spirit. And I graduated as an interfaith minister in 2013. So I'm legal clergy, and have performed many life cycle events throughout the past 7 years since I graduated seminary. And we meet every Thursday night in a Zoom call, same format as this really, and different people lead an hour-long discussion slash prayer slash just sort of be together kind of experience. And one of my colleagues last night mentioned something very deeply spiritual about the notion of antibodies, and that this period we're in, where people who have been infected by the virus, stay with me here, people who have been infected by the virus who then recover from it and create antibodies that can then be shared, their blood, which has been poisoned, is then cured. And that cure can then be given to us. So the spiritual transfer is the pain, the poison is actually the medicine. The pain becomes the medicine. And this notion of herd immunity, that 60% of us have to be infected and come through the other side of it, for the other 40% to not be affected by it. It is so fascinating that this is a metaphor for how we should function in the world, that those of us who are willing to embrace our pain, those of us who, in the case of coronavirus, it's not a willingness, you must embrace it. And if you are strong enough, as most people are, I'm not belittling or I don't want anybody to walk away to think that I'm not including the suffering, the real suffering of loss and death that's going on. It is substantial, it is real, it is indefinable, and it is truly painful without a Pollyanna, oh, but look the good it does. That's not what I'm saying. Right. What I'm saying is the ones who do get it and to recover from it are the agents of change. They are the shamans. They are the ones who can take that suffering and turn it into salvation for the rest of us. And I think that may be, I'm telling you this story because I think that might be what attracts me to the things I write, that kind of transformation. Big Fish has that transformation. The Man in the Ceiling has that transformation. I Am Harvey Milk has that transformation. The Addams Family has that transformation. Two different families who see two other families xenophobically. Their xenophobia is enormous in the Addams Family, and they learn to accept the other, while they only can learn to accept the other when they learn to accept their shadow self. Right. And that kind of shadow work is something that we do a lot in seminary and that we talk about a lot in spiritual life, because it really is the notion that the only transformation that matters and the only way society can be transformed is if we transform ourselves from within. That the work is not for you. I don't make the musicals for you. I make the musicals for me to transform myself. And in doing so, you might be able to find some of your own humanity in it. And that sounds really lofty, but that is, I think, at the core, what motivates me, even in my silliest way. You know, I'm writing a group of songs for this ridiculous thing called Tiger King, the musical.
I'm following you.
We'll talk about that later, and the new one's coming out next week. But even when I succeed, when I write a song that has that affects somebody. I've written a bunch of crappy songs, but when I write ones that really hit and affect people, it's because there's something, it can't come from here. And this is the same thing of in acting. This is the same thing in dancing. It's the same thing in making music. It has to come from our core, and our core, another name for our core is our soul. And whatever it is, that indefinable thing inside us that we wrestle with. Pain is great. Struggle is great, because it is only when we struggle that we can find out what's on the other side of it. Again, physical pain is challenging. Disease, I'm not one of those people who says, it happened for a reason. I don't buy that easy spirituality, that easy psychology. What I buy is the recognition that when we are in pain, we have an option, we have a choice to dialogue with it and to at least allow it to be something that we can, if we can use it, let's use it.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, that's so well put, Andrew. I'm gonna go rogue on my questions here for a second, because a lot of writers that I know, when they're in these moments of pain, that they, in their mind, are looking towards the transformation on the other end of it. That when they're grappling in serious discomfort is when they feel very productive as a writer. Is that true for you?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Wild Party. The Wild Party was born of a bunch of hidden things from me, things that I had hidden from myself. Childhood wounds and a desire to be one of the cool kids, and a gay man in my 30s who had gone through the significant height of the AIDS, all of the AIDS crisis up until 1996, before an effective pharmaceutical treatment was available, that sex would kill me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do drugs, although I wanted to get high. I wanted to escape who I was. Mm-hmm. But I somehow knew, I don't know why, but the things I did weren't going to immediately kill me in a way that a drug overdose might, or alcohol might hurt my brain. I didn't do things to hurt my brain. I treasured my brain. I thought I had a good brain, and I wanted to keep nurturing my brain, because I thought if I kept doing that, maybe I could be successful. But the characters in the Wild Party, their desire to look at me, love me, be seen, be heard, and to express rage, even though they didn't know where the rage came from. That's me. So when the Wild Party got criticized, and it also got praised, but when it got criticized, that criticism felt like it was of me. And my relationship to criticism has gone through a 20-year process of learning how to accept it, especially in the development of a piece, because it's helpful and useful, and ask people, well, can I make this better? And that's useful, but sometimes it can be very, very painful. And the Wild Party was an extraordinary experience for me creatively, but it was born of a lot of things that I had hidden from myself. And that's why I think also why it was this giant explosion of feeling. And the thing that people respond to, if they like the Wild Party, is just that explosion of feeling that the piece gives and gives and allows people to express.
It certainly felt like that, living inside of the story. And it's interesting that you mentioned reviews. I've had someone ask me recently if I read them, and of course, as a producer now, I do read them because it's part of my job.
Sure.
As an actor, I had what I felt was the luxury of not having to. So, I mean, that conversation about theater criticism and theater critics, in Atlanta, we all dance around this conversation too, because I think we kind of struggle a little bit in this conversation of who are the critics and who do we listen to, and as we all do, right? But I think in communities that are a little smaller than New York, it's even more of a bear. It's more of like the elephant that's in the room. So I say to all of our Zoomers that are on this call, if you are an actor, I invite you not to read your reviews.
As do I.
Something very empowering about that, there really is.
Look, there's this whole thing, and a friend of mine, when the Addams Family happened, I don't know if anybody read in the New York Times, there was an article a couple weeks ago about the Addams Family 10 years since it happened on Broadway, and it said, the title of the article was, the headline of the article was, the Addams Family was panned, then it became a hit. And it was a great article about how, it got shitty reviews. It ran for 2 years. It had a huge national tour. We retooled the whole thing and rewrote the whole thing. It's been the most produced musical 4 out of the last 5 years in North America. It's been seen by 37 million people. It's grossed over $500 million in ticket sales around the world. It's translated into 15 languages. There's an enormous joy in everything I just told you, but I will say that when the Addams Family first happened and it was not received well in the press, a friend of mine a really good friend of mine sent me a series of reviews for Tchaikovsky and Brahms and Stravinsky and Beethoven, and they were all like the most awful things you could imagine for pieces we now consider to be classics of the repertoire. Things like, it was as if Mr. Tchaikovsky entered the Who is the Worst Composer competition and won. I mean, literally like that. And my friend said to me, but these artists, the imperative for these artists was to create. And their imperative to create was greater than their imperative to be adored.
Oh, God, I love that.
I'm going to say that again. Their imperative to create was greater than their imperative to be adored. And that one hit me right in the center of my eyes, because I spent most of my life wanting you, whoever you are, to love me. Because going back to the shadow work and the work of the self, I didn't love myself. I mean, it's so simple. You say it out loud to artists, and artists get it. And people who aren't artists think that we're all sort of touchy-feely, emotional. And I'm like, fuck you, people. That's the reason we have wars and fucking North Korea and Donald Trump. But I didn't want to get into politics today. And if we don't work on ourselves, I said that at the beginning of this call, the work is about personal transformation. It is always about personal transformation. And the better you are, the better your art will be.
That's so true. When you were working on and performing I Am Harvey Milk, what was that like for your writer's brain? Because I mean, this is a wonderful segue to this conversation, because I would think, you know, the writer is approaching one task, and the performer is bringing to life the writer's words. And when that is one and the same, I love having this conversation with folks who have written the show, that they're then stepping into the shoes of the character.
Sure. So you just hit on something that I wanted to expound on. I have been fortunate to be on the Council of the Dramatists Guild of America for over 12 years, and in my first couple years on the council, Edward Albee was also on the council. And Edward, I would sit in these meetings with people like Edward Albee, and I'd be like, I'm not going to say anything. Like, why would I speak up? And Edward would often say this. He would say, there is only one creator in the room, the playwright. Mm. Everyone else is an interpreter. And he is right. And when you make a musical, I consider all the writers of the musical the playwright. So, and this is not a pejorative about people who are interpreters. Right. This is, I made something. And when I read so-and-so created the role of such and such in the original production, I'm like, no, you didn't. Yeah. You didn't create anything. You played that role. You were the first person to do it. But there are many other words you could use. Created, no, that belongs to me. I created that role with my writing colleague or colleagues, whoever I worked on writing that show. And that's an important distinction, because an actor's job is not to create. An actor's job is very creative. I'm not saying there's no creativity in interpretation. There's an enormous amount of creativity in interpretation. But the actor's job is to take what has been created and to animate it. Mm. And that's an important distinction. And so when I act in my own pieces, in the case of Harvey Milk, I wrote I Am Harvey Milk before I considered who was going to play that part. And so by the time I got to 80% of that score, I hadn't decided I was going to do it. And we did a little workshop in New York that I experimented by playing the part, and all of my colleagues who came said, you've got to do this. This is built for you. You've got to do this. And I said, yes, I will do this when we premiere it. And then I've done it a few times since. I did it at Disney Hall with with Alexander Silver and 550 singers. And I did it at Avery Fisher Hall, now Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center, with Kristen Chenoweth and the Orchestra of St. Luke's. And I did it with 750 singers in Denver for a 5,000 person audience. That was an amazing evening. And being an actor in my own work then is no different than being an actor in any other work that I get asked to be in. My job is to inhabit the character and to do the work that allows me to express what it is that the writers want to have expressed. And I love, if you're in a really good piece where the writers have thought about every detail of character, then it's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it's defined, right? And when you're in a piece where you're not quite sure what's going on or why that is there, I take my judgment hat off when I'm an actor. and my writer's hat goes away, because my job is to interpret the work that they wrote and to show them what they wrote. This goes back to criticism, by the way. I think, nobody asked what I think, but hey, I'm the guest on the Zoom call.
We
so
actually did ask.
I think the role of the critic, well, the modern role of the critic, unfortunately, is to sell newspapers, is to be part of, or whatever they try to sell, whatever it's the internet. It's to be, I think they see themselves as a liaise. They liaise between the audience and between the show, and they're also very ego-driven often, and they want to be quoted, or they want to be seen as having an effect on the piece. The critics whose work I truly admire and really respect are the ones who recognize that a piece in New York, it's so different, because when you get to New York, it's traditionally, New York's the end of the line for a piece. It's been developed, it gets to New York, and then it's got the stamp of it was in New York, or it was on Broadway, or it got its nominations, no matter how long it ran. And then it gets its recordings, and it gets its publications, and it gets its licenses, and then it goes out into the world. And many times, then the show can go flourish, even if it didn't flourish in New York, because it got the imprimatur stamp of in New York City. I don't make those rules, and I don't, the people who've been running the Broadway League stamped Tony Award and Broadway, the word Broadway, onto everything. They've done an amazing marketing job. I can't fight City Hall. But anywhere outside, like Atlanta, it surprises me, because the idea is a critic should meet like you would meet, like I would meet an actor. If an actor here watching us today, and this was an actual master class, I would say to you, or if you were writing a song and I was going to be a mentor, I would say, what is it you mean to do? What is it you mean to say? And rather than going in to see a musical, which I never do anymore, to see a musical this way, and go like, this better be good. I don't approach it from like, you've got to show me how good it is. I approach it from, this is a friggin' hard collaborative thing to make. Yeah. And what is it you're trying to do? And somebody like Chris Jones in Chicago gets it so right. And Chris, I consistently, when I read things that Chris writes about my work or others, he looks at it through that lens. What are they trying to accomplish, and what did they do, and what do I think they may want to do next? But he almost always couches it in, it's their thing, and this is what I think they might benefit from, as opposed to, I don't like, I do like, this is bad, this is good. That kind of criticism, and that's the majority of New York criticism, sounds like that to me, is useless to me as an artist, because how am I going to make my piece better? It played in New York. Like, we're done. Right. And in the case of the Addams Family, we got the opportunity to make it better, but it doesn't happen on most shows.
Right. And then with the Wild Party as well, as you're continuing to develop that.
I was a newbie. I was a brand new thing. And there were some people, and I know their names, and I know where you live. I know their names, and I'll mention them frequently to this day. The artists and mentors and critics who saw something special in what I had made. And they may not have said, it's perfect, but they said, he's got something. Go with him, follow him, and pay attention to him, and or just give him another opportunity. I'm not looking for acolytes. I'm just looking for opportunity. And so going back to teaching, if we can sort of try to keep on message, that's why I do it, because I was given it. I was given it by Stephen Schwartz and Sheldon Harnick and Stephen Sondheim and Arthur Lawrence and so many of the greats who are a generation or more older than me. And they were willing to tell me and to say to others, Hal Prince, they were willing to say to others, this guy has a voice. You should pay attention to him. And the truth is, like, if Hal Prince got up and said, Andrew Lippa is a talented man, and a critic from I don't care where says I'm a talented man, who do I care more about? Like, I'm going to care more about Hal. And so I got my percentage of that. I got that, and I don't need that anymore. My job now, as a leader of a nonprofit, the Dramatist Guild Foundation, and as a man of 55 years who's written 10 musicals, my responsibility is to do what my mentors did for me, and now to help other writers, either in emergency situations like people are right now, and that we're doing at the Dramatist Guild Foundation, giving out, hopefully by the end of this year, $1.5 million to writers in the theater in need, and to build up the next generation of theater writers and give them opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's great. We're going to soon open up to being in conversation with our Zoomers. So if you all would like to go ahead and put your hands up so we can have those queued up. And please do participate in conversation, because this is an opportunity, frankly, I don't think you should miss.
I'm not scary.
You're really not. You touched on something that I would like to pose this question, Andrew, in the event that there's someone on this call who doesn't ask it but might want to. In a community that is not New York, even though Atlanta is a big theater town and a big music town, you music directed, you arranged. I think you first did that at Goodspeed, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot, and I believe that there are a lot of these folks in Atlanta, you very talented musicians who are great music directors, very good arrangers, very sought after, and they have these mad composing skills. It's tough, if someone asks me, if someone says, I wrote a play, can I send it to you and you read it? I'll say, yeah. If I can't get to it for a couple of weeks, I'll be honest about it, or maybe even a couple of months, but definitely I will read it and give you feedback if that helps, and try to nurture someone who wants to become a playwright, who has a real craft there. I wonder sometimes if it's harder when you're a working musician who makes a probably very good living doing that, but you also want to write for the theater. What advice would you have for that person?
Ultimately, I can only give you the advice that I took myself or both, which is if you build it, they will come kind of advice, which is if you have an idea, go make it. Find a playwright you like, in the local playwright who's interested in it, or a lyricist or start writing lyrics like I did. I had never written lyrics before I started work on the Wild Party, and it turns out I wasn't too bad at it, and so I kept doing it, and I really was interested in it, and I kept trying to get better at it. Nothing happens if you don't do it. And I participated as an athlete in a thing in 2012 called Tough Mudder. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's Spartan Race is a little more well known, I think, but they do Tough Mudders all around the world. They are usually 11 or 12 mile races through about 21 Navy SEAL style obstacles. You literally claw your way through muddy PVC pipe into a mud pit, and then claw your way back up, and then run another mile, and then jump into ice water, literally ice water, and have to submerge yourself under barbed wire to get to the other side. And why anybody pays to do this, I don't know. But I did it when I was 46, and I didn't get injured, and it was an exhausting, amazing 4-hour experience that I trained for 9 months for. And the reason I mention it to you is because when I was training, I worked out at this really indie, tiny gym in the basement of a Holiday Inn on 57th Street in New York City that was filled with the kind of people who go to basement gyms in a Holiday Inn, and really small room, extreme looking people, and a lot of posters everywhere that were the workout equivalent of the kitten on the branch hang in there, Friday's coming, or whatever, it's almost Friday. And the one that really stuck with me was this about, it was about pumping iron, and it said, people will not always believe what you say. Oh. Now, that first part of it, I recognize, because I'm like, you might get mad and say, I'm gonna kill him. And it's like, most people don't end up killing him. And but the whole sentence is, people will not always believe what you say, but they will always believe what you do. And I'm going to write the great American novel. Well, yeah, sure. Go do it. I haven't had time, and I've been busy, and I've got stuff to do, and I'm tired, and whatever. Everybody's got responsibilities. Everybody has to make a living. I had to make a living. I still have to make a living. And that commitment to saying, I'm going to do it, is powerful. It's difficult. A lot of us know this in relation to our physical fitness, or, dieting, any self-improvement. Writing is a form of self-improvement, and that kind of discipline of saying, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to find the people to do it, takes a lot of drive and a lot of willingness. Somebody has to be the motor. Why not you? And that's the number one thing. The second thing is, if you're around theater a lot, then surely you must love theater. You must love what theater does and can do. And I would say anybody writing a musical, the thing to study is not only musicals, but plays, and to understand why plays work the way they work, and what makes a good play a good play. And the answer, be able to answer the questions of, why is this character singing? What does this character want? The multiple arcs that you have to create. You have this long story with everybody in it. You have each individual story. If you look at Fiddler on the Roof, what's Tevye's story and what's Tevye's score? What does he sing? And what do the other people sing that he's not involved with? And why isn't he involved with it? Why do we still pay attention to that? And all of these questions about, what's the musical about? Now, this is a big one. What's the musical about? Well, the famous story about about Fiddler on the Roof was that Jerome Robbins, there wasn't a good opening number yet, and Jerome Robbins asked the writers, what's this musical about? And they started saying, well, it's about these people in a shtetl in the late 19th century in Russia. And he's like, no, that's the story. What's it about? And it turns out that Fiddler on the Roof is about, and they realized this, Fiddler on the Roof is about maintaining traditions. How do you maintain traditions? And how do you maintain your own spiritual and religious tradition in the face of a changing world where things change too quickly, and you don't, at what point do you say yes, at what point do you say no? And they wrote the song Tradition, and which set up what the whole musical was about. If you go through that musical, there's one song that doesn't really have a tendril that connects to that idea. There's one song in that score that doesn't quite connect to that idea. In my opinion, it's the least effective song in Fiddler on the Roof. And you won't have to guess which one it is. I will tell you. It's the opening of Act 2. It's Perchik's song, Now I Have Everything. And it is the one I think is the least known song in the score. And I think it's the least known song because it isn't as deeply connected to what that play is really about.
Yeah. Wow. We could talk. I wish we had more time, so I'd love to talk about other musicals with you and all that. But we get a lot of hands coming up. So Pamela Gold.
Hi there.
Hi, Pamela.
Hi, great to meet you, and thank you for all these wonderful nuggets. I feel like I'm just consuming so much during this quarantine time, and I appreciate the opportunity to interact and to be a listener also. So thanks for sharing your time. I have a question, and it may be hard to answer because I'm a mother, and I would imagine that you probably think about your shows like children. So it may be hard to answer this, but I'm just curious whether you have a favorite piece you have created or worked on, and why. And then a second part is just curious to know what you're working on now, what you might have been working on before quarantine, or what have you found to work on while in quarantine?
Sure. Hi, Pamela. My sister's name is Pamela, so I automatically feel connected to you, so that's nice.
Excellent.
Yes, you're right. Who picks their favorite child? I am very, 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 very deeply fond of I Am Harvey Milk. It came out of a request to write a 5-minute piece, and I turned it into a counter request of writing an entire full-length work that I was given a commission for, and an automatic 10 separate productions from the very first day. We premiered it on June 26th. 2013, which was the day the Supreme Court of the United States struck down the Defense of Marriage Act and the heinous Proposition 8 in California. We premiered it in California, in San Francisco, 2 blocks away from where the mayor, George Moscone, and Supervisor Harvey Milk had been gunned down in cold blood. And we did it in a theater with 1,500 people in San Francisco, many of whom had lived through the civil rights marches of the 60s and 70s, and certainly the gay rights movement of the 70s in San Francisco. And we recorded it over those 3 days. The end of those 3 days, the women who were part of the plaintiff, I'm forgetting their names, Sandy and I'm forgetting their names. The women who were part of the case of Prop 8 case. It was Kamala Harris was the Secretary of State of California then, and on the Thursday, we premiered on the Wednesday. On the Thursday, she announced at the end of the day that weddings would be were going to be allowed, and on Friday, she performed the first wedding, which was those 2 women who were the plaintiffs in the Prop 8 case, who got married in the City Hall at San Francisco, and the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. We all assembled, watched. I got to be in the private chambers to watch the wedding happen. And then when they came out, the whole chorus sang a piece from I Am Harvey Milk called San Francisco. And part of that experience is caught in a film, a documentary called The Case Against Prop 8. And it was this experience of combining my love for making musical theater and expressing language and music to affect people, along with my social justice bone and my sense of gay identity. And as a performer, I was in it, and we were recording it live. So it was a pretty heady, extraordinary experience. It was also the same month I got a new dog, and I graduated from seminary, all within 3 weeks. All of that happened in that month. So it was a pretty big deal, and for me, and therefore is at the top of experiences.
Wow.
And working on right now, I'm working on a number of projects that are Los Angeles based. One of them is a new show with a lot of songs in it, musical show for HBO Max that I'm the co-creator and executive producer of, as well as writing all the songs. And we just are getting started in writing the first 2 episodes. And so that's going on. We're almost at the green light phase of the development of the writing of a new original movie musical. And I'm working on 2 new musicals, one with a writing partner in Los Angeles and one on my own. The one I'm writing on my own is based on the film The Turning Point with Anne Bancroft and Shirley MacLaine, about 2 women facing that point in their lives in the ballet world. And I'm about halfway through the first act of that musical, and hope to return to that soon. After my Tiger King songs, I will return to them.
Turning Point was a turning moment in my. I was a ballet dancer for many years before transitioning into musical theater, and so that scene I did in my acting class in college. I did the rooftop scene with Anne Bancroft and Shirley MacLaine throwing drinks at each other.
Well, Arthur Lawrence was a mentor and friend of mine to me, and it's amazing that I am fond of saying that I get to collaborate with Arthur posthumously. I feel like Arthur sits with me when I'm working through, we're making this musical, and I feel like Arthur's in the room with me, and it's a really cool experience. And so far in the development of what I think we're going to do, the majority of the musical is song and music, but the very last, that's penultimate moment, that scene that you described is right now the original scene is going to be included in the musical. We'll see if it needs to get cut down, but it's exciting to have to expose that scene. It's such an amazing scene.
Yeah, wow, thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Chloe K has a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Chloe.
Hi, thank you so much for talking with us. I love what you've said about, especially about working with your shadow side and transformational work in songwriting. So I'm an actor, but I'm also a songwriter, almost firstly a songwriter, I would say. And I've only ever written from my own personal experience. And I've always been interested in potentially, writing for theater naturally, as sort of my other love. So my question is there always a part of you that you find in the music that you're writing? And is that necessary? Or do you think that a heightened sense of empathy is all you need to write for a character? Or do you need to find that, transformational work in yourself to like really connect that core connection, that soul connection with your work?
Well, congratulations, Chloe, on maintaining a dual career and also for your interest in writing a musical. It is nothing I would recommend and everything I would want you to do. And the answer, I suppose, comes with a little addendum or whatever, the prelude, which is I've only written the music to one show. Meaning I've only written only the music to one show, and that's the musical A Little Princess that I wrote with Brian Crawley, who wrote the book and lyrics. And so my experience of that show was, did I have to bring a heightened sense of empathy, or did I bring myself to each of those characters? And I think the answer is the latter. I think I'm still bringing myself. In fact, I've played Miss Minchin, the relatively nasty headmistress of the girls' school, in a reading that we did where we played around whether or not we would do a trouser roll, or a drag roll, whatever the term is. Forgive me for stumbling there. That I played Miss Minchin, and Miss Minchin sings a song. I love this song she sings. It's called Lucky, and she sings about how Sarah Crew is lucky, and that's the only reason that anybody likes her, is that she's a freak of fortune, that she's been touched by the gods, and that's all she's ever done. She's never worked for her money. She's never worked for her privilege. But the whole song is in a major key. And so there's a sinister thing going on in the song, but it's still in a major key. And I think the music in A Little Princess, as in everything I write, and then of course the lyrics is a different conversation, because that's even more deeply connected to who I am, because I have to be able to be me, to be them, to have them express themselves. And so I'm guessing that my best work is when I'm submerged in it, and that the audience isn't aware that it's me talking. That the challenge is always, you want to still the voice of the writer and speak through the voice of the character. And that's, I think, the what makes it fun.
Do you find it challenging to not maybe project some of your own perspective onto the character's perspective? Does that ever, do you find yourself thinking, oh, that was Andrew talking, and maybe the character wouldn't have thought that way?
Yeah, I mean that's a common thing as you might go through developing a show, and those songs go away, or
Right.
those parts of the songs go away because you try to wake up to, the character wouldn't really sing that way or talk that way. I mean, the famous example is Sondheim always talking about I Feel Pretty and how embarrassed he is by the language that Maria uses, and that the character would never say fizzy and funny and fine and several other things that she says in the song. But all of us have inherited that song, and those of us who love that score go like, oh, piddly dosh, I love that song. And so, but Steve wrote it, it's his song, he can do what he wants with it.
Right.
And so yeah, the joy of making musicals is further joyful when you live long enough and people want to do them again in a substantial way, and I get involved. So the revivals of John and Jen, the the redo of the Wild Party at City Center, when we did a Little Princess a couple of years ago with the Royal Philharmonic in London, Big Fish when we redid it and did that in London with Kelsey Grammer. These opportunities to go back and add things and change things because my perspective has changed and I've gotten better at it. They're novels. Jeffrey Eugenides took 9 years to write Middlesex and won the Pulitzer Prize. It took him 9 years to write that book. But I'm glad it took him 9 years because it's an extraordinary book. And so they shouldn't happen quickly. And because they are these big things that demand a lot of hands and a lot of editing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Christian.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Christian.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Really appreciate it. I was curious, is there a project that you were passionate about that you ended up shelving? And if you did, what were the reasons you shelved it? And if you took it off the shelf, take it off the shelf.
Great question. There are 2 extant projects of mine that just didn't get there. And by the way, like as a batting average, it's pretty good. I'm quite pleased, and I can't believe I just used the baseball illusion, but there you go. And one of them is called Jerry Christmas, which I co-wrote with Daniel Goldfarb. And we got as far as, we developed it at New York Stage and Film and had a wonderful workshop experience, reading experience there. And we did another reading in New York City with a Broadway producer who wanted to help us develop it. We could never figure out how to tell the second act story. And ultimately we just couldn't figure it out. And so we put it away and we thought maybe someday we'll come back to it. And in fact, maybe we will someday come back to it. Daniel and I remain friends. And I wrote, and the good thing about that project was I wrote some really funny lyrics, and it was the project I did it was 2 projects before the Addams Family, and it was a good opportunity to have written a score with funny lyrics because I didn't feel as pressured in the Addams Family to be funny. Like I was fun. The Addams Family lyrics are funny, but it was like, I can do this. I've done this. I know how to write funny lyrics. And the other one that I would love Amanda to develop at the Alliance is called Asphalt Beach. And it was intended to be a film originally, and then it morphed into being a musical that we did at Northwestern University's American Musical Theater Project. And it is the reason I got the job of writing the score for the Addams Family, because the producer at that project at the time also was the producer of the Addams Family, who, when he saw the work I did on Asphalt Beach, took me to lunch and said, would you do the Addams Family? And so if that was my audition for the Addams Family, that's fine. But Asphalt Beach is a story particularly about 2 girls at a Catholic girls' school in New Jersey called Our Lady of the Suppressed Desire Academy for Rambunctious Young Girls. And it's run by a stern headmistress named Sister Severia, who has a deep, deep secret that is revealed ultimately at the end of the show. And it's a very pop rock, contemporary, ridiculously un-PC show that I was working with the guys who wrote the book are not experienced theater writers, and we didn't have a strong producerial or directorial hand. We had great people involved, but not somebody who had a lot of experience developing musicals. And I think we would have benefited by somebody being really strict with us and saying, you do this, do that. Because you need a captain of the ship, and we didn't really have a captain. Mm-hmm. And so now that I've wet Amanda's whistle on this one, I'll send her the materials.
You heard it here.
It's I'm telling you, it's 12 actors. 9 of them are high school girls. And so at that age, like college age women, and the other 3 are, the adult quote unquote characters. And it's an inexpensive show, and it's going to be a huge hit at the Alliance. And so come see us in 2022 when the doors reopen.
Sounds great. Thank you so
I
much.
hope our doors are open before 2022.
By the way, our beloved listeners, what I just did is called in Jewish parlance chutzpah, and but I've always had that chutzpah, and so I encourage you to do the same. If you believe in the work you're doing and you've got something delicious, and by the way, go make something delicious. People can't respond to ideas. This is Hollywood does that. They hire you for based on an idea. Here, I'll pitch it this thing. It might be this. It might be that. Pay me for it. No, we don't do that in the theater. In the theater, make a thing. Here, I want you to produce this cock cup. I want you to produce this. And I've made it, see? And on the other side, nothing. This is what it looks like. And then Amanda goes, you know what? I think that's a great cock cup, but I think you should have a hen on the other side, don't you think? And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. And then I go home and I add a hen, and I come back the next day and I show her cock hen, and she goes, that's fantastic. And then her boss says, yes, but you ought to put something in it. And we're like, oh, that's something we never thought about. And we go home, we come back, and we put something in it. And sooner or later, you either destroy the cock cup or you've made it better, and you put it on stage to find out just how good. This you should do.
That was the best analogy I've ever heard. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Kristen.
And we will do that. We are at 3:03, and I'm gonna do a final call for questions here. It's a bit of a shy group. I don't see any more hands coming up, but I will say, holy cow, what a great hour with you, Andrew.
Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for the great questions.
We've all learned so much, and I've been trying to jot things down without being obvious that I'm not looking in the screen. Your mind and your spirit are just unparalleled, truly. We're really grateful for this time with you. And I'll be looking in my inbox. I knew the second I said that someone would have a question, but I will be looking in my inbox for Asphalt Beach. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you got.
Okay, Kristen, you're on. I think, yes.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
My question is, I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your relationship with discipline as far as musicianship is concerned. Because I know that's where you have to start first before you can start composing.
Most times that is true, correct. I say most times because sometimes not, but I'm old school in a certain way, and do strongly believe that composers ought to be good musicians.
Right.
You ought to be good at some instrument, and even if that means singing, but you have to be a really good singer. I was always a singer from when I was very little, and that was how I learned music. I had a great fortune of going to a public school that had a wonderful music program, and my elementary school music teacher won Michigan State Music Teacher of the Year award once or twice while I was her student, and while I was while I was a little boy. And so I had great teachers, and I had great high school music teachers as well. I started playing piano very late. I was in October of 8th grade. I was a couple months shy of 14, and I could already read music, but I had never played the piano. And by the time I was in the spring of 11th grade, I played the Beethoven Second Piano Concerto. And so in less than 3 years, I went very, very quickly because I was very motivated. I liked to practice, and I wanted to play, and I wanted to play theater scores, and I wanted to always make music, sing and play the piano whenever I could. Went to the University of Michigan, go Blue. Went to the University of Michigan as a voice major, had a really good freshman year, won 2 competitions, and felt confident that I could pursue a voice degree if I wanted to. Turns out I didn't want to, and I ended up with a degree in music education, but that's when I started composing and conducting. And that's also when I was working with the best of the 3 piano teachers I had my teacher Lynn Bartholomew at the University of Michigan, who really taught me how to play the piano. And so I've always been blessed. I always I will always say that if the question ever comes up is, in a party game, what's the one thing you would take with you if the house is burning down, or you could only have one thing on the deserted island? And for me, it would be a piano or a keyboard. The opportunity to play the piano is something that I love, and it's my favorite thing in the planet. So I'm grateful that I play, and I play pretty well.
You do. Thank you for that question, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have assignments, and one of them is if you want to go and think about that Cock-Hen musical as well, because I got nothing but time to read your delightful work, so send it on. But seriously, Andrew, thanks for the afternoon. We appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for everybody participating in this call, and I wish you all the best. Stay safe and well, and use your common sense even if your governor isn't. So be well, and thank you.